Hello everybody and welcome back to New Angle Analytics. This is a new channel where I do tips and tutorials on SQL, Tableau, and in the future maybe even more. Today we're once again taking a look at SQL. We're going to be talking about subqueries. And now I realize that this is a big topic. In order to use the time in the best manner, I'm just going to focus on how to use subqueries in the where clause of your larger query. So we're going to take a look at a couple of examples in order to understand the concept a little bit better. As a reminder, I already have one video uploaded. It's about the date name function and how you can use that in SQL and extract the name of a month from a date field, and not just that, but also sort those months in their calendar order. I will put the link to that video in this video's description. But right now, let's get back to today's topic. And let's take a look at what table we have and how we can use subqueries to get the results we're looking for.
Okay, so let's start with our first example. We're going to do two in this video. And in the first example, we're going to be looking at this table. It's a table that I created called songs. If you watched the first video on this channel, you may remember I had a table with albums from the rock band Queen. In this example, it's a table called songs, and we have 170 songs that Queen recorded in those studio albums. So it's a very simple table, a couple of identifiers here, a unique identifier for songs, then, a column I can use for joins later, then the track number, the song title, the album name, and the duration represented in seconds. So here's the first question we're trying to answer. What are the titles of Queen songs that run longer than the average? In other words, what songs run longer than Queen's average song length? So, before we go any further, here's the end result. Let me just show you what we're trying to get. So this is the result. These are the number of rows that we're trying to get to. So there's actually one way you can get to it without using a subquery. It is not something that I would recommend, and I'll tell you why, but it is available to you. So one thing that you could obviously do is, as a first step, you could do, I know that the song length is stored in the duration column represented in seconds. So something quite simple that I could do is just take the average duration of the songs as my first query. I can run this, and I know that this table only has Queen songs, so I don't have to include any kind of where clause where I filter for just Queen songs. I know that it's just their songs in this one. So if I run this, this will run, and it will give me 219 seconds. That's basically the average length of a Queen song. And as a secondary query, in order to get to the end result that I wanted, I could do, I could say select song title to grab the titles of the songs. I can define my table, and I can say where duration is higher than 219. And if I run this, this will perfectly run. It will give me the 84 rows that I was looking for, and it will display the song titles. And I could add a whole bunch of other information to this query, right? I could add the album name. I could add the durations of each of these songs. I could do all sorts of things. So this looks quite simple. And as you can tell, there was no subquery involved here. And the reason why I wouldn't recommend it is because this is not really scalable. Imagine a scenario where tomorrow I add, today the average is 219 seconds, but what happens if I add a few more songs, or if I realize that I made a mistake with some of the durations and I alter the table? Not to mention, this table, the songs table, only has 170 records, which is quite small. A lot of people deal with millions and millions of records, and every day you're receiving thousands more. So in that kind of scenario, you'd have to extract this information first and then run your query again and again. So it's not super scalable. So let's go back to the topic of subquery. Essentially, a subquery is a query that you run nested inside a larger query, right? But in essence, it is a query in and of itself. It's something that you are able to run in SQL. You're just running it nested inside another one. That's it. That's the whole concept. So a very simple way of thinking about it in this example is I'm basically trying to replace the number 219 with a query. That query will become my subquery, but it will not involve the number 219. So how do I go about that? Well, let's start with actually this query that we ran earlier. And let's take this. I'm just going to grab it. And I'm going to leave it here for now. I know that this one runs, right? This is the query that gives me 219. And if tomorrow I add 10 more songs to this table or I alter the values of the existing songs, it doesn't matter. As long as I run this query, it will give me the updated number. So I don't have to worry about what happens to the average as long as I have this query all set up. So let's keep this in mind. And I'm just going to clear some space here. So the end result we're looking for are those 84 rows of song titles, right? Songs that are longer than the average Queen song. So let's focus on that larger query right now. So I'm going to put song title here. Let's actually put the duration too. Let me grab the lengths of each songs in seconds. I'm going to do my from clause because I'm grabbing the information from the same table, from the same songs table. Now here's where the subquery will come into the picture. Like I said before, a subquery will replace this 219 number with something that is actually a query and not something constant, which means that I can go ahead and create my where clause because I know that I'm still looking at the duration in my filter. I'm trying to filter these song titles by their duration. So that information will have to remain. That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. I'm also I'm going to keep the greater than sign because I need that. I'm looking for a certain duration and I'm looking for the song titles to be longer than that certain duration. So here's where the subquery will come into the picture. Remember this that we ran that gave us 219? All I have to do is basically put this separate query in parentheses. A lot of times, actually, it's also a good idea to indent this just so that, you can, it's a little bit clearer to see how the information is flowing in your larger query. But essentially, like I said, a subquery is a query in and of itself. If I run this, this runs on its own. But if I run the larger query, that will run as well. It will give me the 84 rows that I wanted. It will give me the duration. Essentially, it did exactly the same thing as this query. It's doing exactly the same, except this one is not scalable. Any change in my table, and this will not give me accurate information anymore. It's just going to give me songs that are longer than 219 seconds, but you'd have to assume that your average song duration has remained the same. Whereas with this query, you don't have to worry about that. As long as you're looking for songs that are longer than the average duration, you can keep using this query because it's going to grab exactly that information and it's going to make automatic adjustments if your table has changed. If the average duration changed, this query will take that into account, whereas this one won't. And in case you're wondering why you have to use parentheses to define a subquery, well, if you didn't use parentheses and you ran this whole thing, SQL would think that you're trying to run two separate queries, and it would actually give you an error because it would think that you forgot to finish your where clause. That's what SQL would think if you're running. Actually, if you want to take a look real quick, if I do this and get rid of the parentheses, and if I run it, it's going to say the wrong syntax near the near your select statement because of right here. It's not finding anything here, so it can run this. But if I put like any kind of numerical information and run, as you can tell, it's running two separate queries here, but that's not what you want. So a parentheses allows SQL to realize that what you're intending to do here is to just use this query as a filter as a subquery to use it as a filter in your where clause of your larger query. So then it will just return one result and not two, and you won't get the error because SQL won't think that something is missing here. Everything is perfectly in place. So that's example number one of how you can use subqueries in your where clause to get the information that you're looking for. Let's take a look at the second example. Okay, so in our second example, we're going to look at a different table. This is the albums table. This might look familiar to you if you watched the first video on the channel, but the difference is this time I added albums from another favorite band of mine, the heavy metal band Megadeth, but essentially it's the same columns as before. I've got the album ID, the artist name, album name, the full release date, as well as the album type, studio, compilation, or live record. So here's what we're trying to get at. We want to find out the earliest Megadeth release and the name of that album. That's what we're trying to get. Now, there's obviously one very easy way to get to that information without using subqueries, and you can actually see it on my screen right now because the albums are ordered by their release date. So right here I can see the earliest Megadeth release, which is Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. Every other album came after that. So that's the information I'm looking to get. But once again, this may not be scalable. And if you're dealing with more, this table only has 50 rows. In real life situations, you're dealing with far larger tables than that. So I'd rather show you something far more scalable that you can use. But you might be asking, why do I even need a subquery in the first place for something like this? Can't I just use something like the minimum function? Well, let's see what happens if I just did, like if I wanted to get the minimum release date, because after all, I can use functions like minimum or maximum or min or max in my date columns. That would give me the earliest and the latest dates. That's not a problem. I can put album name. I know that the table is the same, so I'm just going to copy and paste this. And let's do artist name is Megadeth. Now let's see what happens when I run this. Oops. Of course, we forgot the group by statement. We got to group these by album name because we are aggregating the release date. So let's run that. So at the end of the day, what happened is I was expecting, we wanted to get one row, right? That's the end result we're trying to get to right now. But instead, I got 25 rows. Why is that? Well, that's because the way that SQL is approaching this, it's actually doing its job. It's running the query completely accurately, except for each album name, since that's how I'm grouping the minimum release dates. SQL is trying to give me the minimum release date for each Megadeth album. But that doesn't really make sense, right? It's quite useless because every album has one release date anyway. So the minimum release date would be the same thing as the album's release date itself. So therein lies the problem. I'm not getting what I'm looking for. Instead, I'm getting the release dates of every single Megadeth album, but that wasn't the ask. That wasn't what was requested from us. So how would I go about getting this information? Well, one thing we could do is, in a situation like this where I understand that I will have to use a subquery, I first try to figure out what that subquery should look like before I worry about the larger query. That's just how I approach it. I know other people could approach it differently, but to me, it kind of helps me to understand what I'm looking to get once I figure out the filter portion. And you might remember in our Queen example, that was the average song duration, right? We first figured that out because we knew that that's the filter that we were going to use to get to the song titles in the end. So in the end, I'm trying to get to the album name. I want to have one row with album name. So in order to get there, I need to first figure out my release date filter. So let's do this. Let's create a query where I extract the minimum release date from the albums table where, once again, the artist name was Megadeth. And when I run this, I'm going to get June 12th of 1985. And this is correct, right? This is just one. I wanted one piece of information, one row, and I got that. And I don't have to worry about any kind of group by statement here because I don't have any other columns. I'm just getting the minimum release date where artist name equals Megadeth. And that's giving me the information. So this will make our subquery. So let's create a little bit of space. We'll worry about that later. We'll worry about that one later. Let's now focus on our larger query. What is the end result we were hoping to get? Well, first of all, we wanted the album name. We want to know the name of the first Megadeth album, right? And let's put the release date too in here, and you'll see why. The table is the same one. It's from the albums table once again. And remember, this is going to go in our where clause just like the last one. So while we're here, let's think about what should come after the where clause. I'm not ready to put my subquery in this one just yet. I need to figure out what it should filter on. And the filter is going to have to be on the release date itself, right? Because I'm trying to get albums that come at a certain release time, which I'm defining in my subquery. I'm basically saying that give me the name of the Megadeth album and its release date, where the release date happens to be the minimum release date of a Megadeth album. That's essentially how I would translate it to English, right? Give me the album name and its release date, where the release date happens to equal the minimum release date of a Megadeth album. Okay? So if I do it this way, of course, I have to put my equal sign. And just like last time, we have to put the second query in parentheses in order to tell SQL that this is a subquery. So if I run this, and there it is, I have my album name and I have my release date. Killing is my business and business is good, which was released on June 12th, 1985. Just one row, very clear information. No need to worry about going through rows and rows of data. And if I had, instead of just 2 bands, if I had, 50 bands on this, and instead of just 50 rows, I had 1,500 rows, wouldn't matter. I could very easily extract this information. Not only that, but here's an additional benefit of building your queries in this manner. If I wanted to get the album name and the earliest album name and the release date of another band, right now I only have 2, so the only other example I can show is Queen. But if I run this, automatically I'll get that the album name was their self-titled debut and the release date was July 6, 1973. So very, very easy and quick to get all kinds of different information once you have the structure down. But this is the benefit of a subquery, right? I don't have to worry about memorizing anything. I don't have to worry about any changes that might occur on my table. This query will extract that information and it'll be far more flexible than trying to, run this and trying to run this first query and then sorting through the album release dates and trying to figure out where you're going. So just 2 examples in this video to show you how you can use subqueries. They are, like I said at the beginning of this video, this topic is quite a big one because it could get rather complicated. I intentionally picked 2 rather simple examples just to illustrate the point, but there are many different uses of subqueries. But the idea is the same. It's a query nested inside another query. So just 2 examples. I'm happy to do more if there's interest, so please let me know in the comments. Please also let us all know if you would approach either of these examples in a different manner. I always welcome comments like that if you'd like to share with us. I've got a lot of content coming up too, some other cool tips and tutorials coming your way. So stay tuned, and thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you soon on another New Angle Analytics video.